Good evening, friends. Couple things I have to remind the friends to maybe put your cell phone on Viber. Dead. You know, tonight is the tribute to the hard work of Tahirih, who was the early believer during the time of the Bab, the forerunner of Baha'u'llah, and we are so fortunate to have two scholars who really put very hard work on this to help us to enjoy the poetry of Tahirih. Please join me to welcome Dr. John Hatcher and Dr. Amrullah Himmat.
We have three that we're going to read from that are published. They are both in English and in Farsi, and some in Arabic, because Tahirih wrote in both. The three books we're going to read from are first Adam's Wish, a collection of unknown poetry by Tahirih, unknown meaning they have never been published in the original, and they certainly have not been translated before we did it. Then a book that we published earlier called The Poetry of Tahirih, which is some of her better known lyric poems that had been published before, but not translated, or at least not as well as we've translated them into English. And then finally we're going to finish with a poem from our book called Reunion with the Beloved, which are poems written by Baha'is who either were about to be executed or who had loved ones who were executed because of their beliefs in the faith. Since there are people in the audience who are not Baha'is, we'll give some introduction, though the poems will speak for themselves because they're about the passion of belief in God, whatever your religious path to God may be. Let me say a word about the first first book, because the second book, The Poetry of Tahirih, is simply a sort of random collection of her better known poems. The second book, Adam's Wish, has a particular significance that we'd like you to be aware of so far as the title and the theme of the book is concerned. And it comes from a manuscript that where the poems are continuous, that was written shortly after, either possibly during her life or shortly thereafter. And then we have a third book that is coming out next year called Resurrection Day, which are the final poems from this collection of Tahirih's poetry, and it has a different tenor altogether. And then right now we're working on a volume of the poetry of Baha'u'llah, founder of the Baha'i faith. This book is called Adam's Wish because, unlike the Christian and Western beliefs about the figure of Adam as the first human being or as the progenitor of human sin and transgression for which Christ came to save us, the Baha'i and the Islamic view of Adam is that he was a prophet from God, a manifestation, a Rasul, and that his purpose, like all the other manifestations, was to bring us gradually through history to a better understanding of God, both through his own demonstration of the qualities of God and his teachings. Adam is still in the Quran alluded to as having sinned in a sense, in that his wish was that humankind didn't have to go through the process so gradually. It would be sort of like a kindergarten teacher wishing that he or she could go ahead and teach nuclear physics to the class because that's more exciting. You know, and that would be the culmination of everything. And so the teacher is frustrated that I can only get them to identify and understand the basic concepts of numbers. And so it was Adam's wish that the progressive revelation that Baha'is believe in, that we are understanding more completely today, could be done all at once, that timeliness wasn't a factor. Qadar, this concept of portioning out enough at a time where we could catch on collectively to what we are about on this planet and this life as we prepare for our entrance into the next stage of our life. So we're going to begin with that, a poem, 2 poems from that book. And we're going to begin in Persian. And so if you don't understand Farsi, just enjoy the melody, because you hear more the musicality in the original than you will in the translation, simply because you can't really translate poetry. You can only write another poem that approximates the original. So you won't hear the melodies, but maybe you'll hear something else in the translation. So listen to the melody. Those of you who understand and speak Farsi, you will understand the total effect of the poem. All right?
I selected different samples of Tahirih's poems so that the audience gets a taste of variety of type of work that is attributed to Tahirih. Now, when you think about Adam's wish, Adam's sin was that he wanted that humanity to get mature right away at his time. I'm thinking, what does that mean? Why Adam was impatient? And one way to understand that is that Adam was the first man on the planet or in creation. So although we know that he was, according to the Baha'i writings, he was a manifestation of God and he was the initiator of a new cycle in human civilization, Adam was not the beginning of creation. And Baha'u'llah says there were many, many, many prophets before Adam, many civilizations. But anyway, one way to understand that is that what Adam wants to happen right then means that that's the destiny of humankind. In other words, the world peace and world unity and spiritual civilization that we think now is time to gradually to take place at the end of an Adamic cycle is what is the destiny of human being on a collective basis. In other words, as an individual, we could fail performing our duty towards that destination. But on a collective basis, humanity is not going to fail. So that's what Adam wanted. That's what Adam's wish means. That means that with Adam, this potential has been created in creation that these civilizations appear. So in this poem that I'm selecting, Tahirih deals with this poem is a bit more complicated one, but I wanted you to get a taste of complicated poems of Tahirih. For those of you who are not familiar, some are familiar. So Tahirih deals with many issues in this poem. One is the determination and free will, philosophical debate of determination and free will. In other words, if humanity is destined to get to a certain point, glorious point, is that a determined thing, or is it something that we have, as individuals, we have a freedom in between of what we are doing? So that's one issue she's dealing with. The other issue she's dealing with in this poem is progressive revelation, that humanity is gradually going to mature up. So God, at each age, according to our capacity, teaches us some reality, new reality, but as we grow, God sends another messenger and teaches us a little bit more, till we get to this time, which is the maturity of mankind at the end of Adamic cycle. So she uses the story of Abraham to symbolize these things. One is the maturation of humanity. One is the maturation of a person, personal transformation. Each one of us could transform, get transformed and grow spiritually. That's another thing that is embedded in this poem. The other one is how the Bab, the prophet founder of the Babi faith, gradually revealed his message. At first he appeared as somebody who brings message from a hidden person, but at the end it was clear that he was the manifestation of God. So he gradually made people grow. And these are some of the concepts that in the story of Abraham, Tahirih is telling us these concepts. Now, the story of Abraham is those that relate to this poem that I'm going to read. I need to tell you about it because otherwise the poem gets kind of very difficult. Abraham, according to the Islamic tradition, at least, he was born in a family of idol worshippers. And the story is that when he was young, his father's profession was to manufacture idols. And he used to question that. What's the power of these idols? Why should we worship them? And so the same is with personal transformation. We have things that we are attached to it, we glorify, we love, and we respect. But then you question, is this really something worthwhile for me or not? So you grow spiritually. So Adam starts with questioning what everybody respects and loves. Like in present culture, there are things that everybody respects. And then one time he breaks all the idols when his father is not there and puts the tool that he used to break the idol on the neck of the one idol that he didn't break. And when the people come back and see everything is broken, they say, who did it? He said, this idol did it. They say, well, he cannot do it. He said, well, if he's your God, he can do it. So he was kind of breaking the tradition. But then in the Quran is that the story that if you take it in a simple way, it's just like a very childish story, but Tahirih describes what the story means. The story is that, of course, Abraham is looking for truth, for God, and he looks at the sky and he sees the stars, and he says, oh, this star is so beautiful. That's worthy of worship, not these idols. Then when the day comes, the star disappears. Then he says, okay, something which is not permanent, it cannot be my God. This beauty is not a permanent beauty, transitory. So then he says, moon is nicer. I mean, as I said, the story is childish if you take it literally. Moon is beautiful, that's my God. And then the moon disappears. Then he says, sun is my God, and the sun disappears. Then he says, okay, I believe in the unseen God, the spiritual world, spiritual divinity, who created all of us. That should be the truth that created us, not this sun and this moon. So he grows gradually in his understanding of reality. And that matches with these stages of growth of humanity, stages of teachings of the Bab, teaching us more and more, the stages of personal transformation and so forth. So the other thing which is mentioned in this poem is the fact that Abraham built the building which is called right now the Kaaba, which is where Muslims go for pilgrimage. Abraham, when he was around 80 years old or so, God told him, go to Egypt, leave everything, go to Egypt. And he went with one of his wives. He had two wives and a child. And the story is that they were in the desert, thirsty, and wife was desperate, the baby was dying, the child was dying, and then she walked between two places 9 times, and when she came back, she found out the child has digged the sand, and the water came out, which is water of Zamzam, which is right now in Arabia, close to Kaaba. And there is a place, they say this is the place that Abraham stood, and they say his footprints is on the rocks, and they call it Maqam Ibrahim. So anyway, so Abraham is the builder of Kaaba, and then later on Muhammad comes and rebuilds it and repairs it. Now, I read this poem, I selected this, one is because of this being a good example of Tahirih's some of the complicated poems, and also it's not too long, so I can read it in Persian, and then John can read it in English. Hopefully I read all in, I guess I do. John told me to do it, I'll do it. But I'm concerned about those who don't understand Persian. That would be you can pay attention to its rhythm and to its music. Now, Tahirih starts with the story of when Abraham looked at the sky, saw this beautiful sky, panorama of sky, beauty of nature, okay? She starts from there. She's talking to Behjat, who is the person, another poet, who was either from Qazvin or Shiraz, and they used to write poems to each other and exchange ideas. And she describes that she looks at the sky and she sees the panorama of the sky and the beauty, and she sees the astrological signs of the future of Behjat. And these signs are very, very beautiful, very, very hopeful. So this is the idea of the determination. In a way, God has determined for Behjat to get to that glorious station, but then she right away deals with the issue of free will. She says, Behjat, you need to do your part. And then she describes that how Abraham was attracted by the beauty of nature, of skies and so forth. And then finally, he was like a drunk person who has fallen, or as a person who has given up, and God's beauty comes and attracts him, and he becomes a new person. He becomes a perfect person. So there are two elements in working together. One is the force or the beauty or the spiritual world which attracts the heart of Abraham. The other one is Abraham himself, to be able to understand that beauty and fall in love with it. And then she tells Behjat that you should become like Abraham, become transformed. And she says humanity to be transformed. And she tells us that we need to understand the Bab's writings and get transformed and so forth. All of them embedded together. So let me read the poem, and then you see some of these concepts in the poem. And then John will read it in English. از بهجتت ای بهجت در بهج نزار آمد، آن جذبه با جذبت در شور و شرار آمد. آمد سلعت نازل از مصدر عز و فر، برگیر کنون منظر با عز و وقار آمد. بشنو تو ایا بهجت از سمعه فتاری، تا آن که عیان بینی موسی به دیار آمد. افلاک بهاییه از دور نزار آمد، از امر الهیه در دور دوار آمد. She's talking about the stars cycling. املاک بهاییه سکان اماییه، از نظره محو او در سکر سکار آمد. برخواندم ایا بهجت آیات تو را یک سر، در نزد ملیک العرش امرت به قرار آمد. توبا لک صد توبا از ما بر از انها، از شطره نورانی حکمت به نظار آمد. This is what beautiful future you have. آمد به یقین بنگر جانت صله اکبر، لا عدل و مثل بافر دورت به مدار آمد. برگیر ایا محبوب از حق صله اعظم، دایم به حضور حق وجهت به نظار آمد. اشجار قراسیه در بطنه فردوسی، از قبه توریه در فتق شرار آمد. بهجت ز تو شد موقد آن شجره ادنیه، از شور شرار وی عالم به شرار آمد. همدست حبیب حق احمد بود او قائم، که از فطره من او نورت به نوار آمد. بالله که او محبوب از صدره علایی، از ذکر عظیم او در صدر صدار آمد. بهجت تو نگر بهجت آیات خداوندی، از آینه قلبت با نور نوار آمد. Now she says, all these things that you see in the skies, the stars and all this beauty of nature, this is all in your heart. There's nothing up there. This is your heart that's discovering these things. محبوب تو هم محبوب ای بهجت با بهجت، از نطق بیان تو آدم به دیار آمد. بنگر تو خداوندی از منظر با انظار، تا آنکه شوی راکب کشتی به قرار آمد. This is the story of Noah. آیی ببرم مشهود اغرب ز طرف و نصر، مرآت بهاییه در دور دوار آمد. باید که تو را همت عالی شود ای بهجت، خواهی ز خداوندت آن را که دیار آمد. از شعشعه شمسی، از لؤلؤ قمری، از ازهره نجمی حکمت به کنار آمد. باید که بیایی تو با جذبه حقانی، شاید که شوی قوم حبت به دیار آمد. So she's saying the same way that Abraham made progress from star to the moon and sun and so forth. You need to make progress. تغییر مبین ای جان در سنت ربانی، از شمس و قمر بگذشت آن کو که به زار آمد. کوکب شدش او ظاهر از شطر سماییه، در محو شد او از نظر افتاد سکار آمد. پس جلوه فطریه لا مثل عدل در آن از شطر اماییه وی را به کنار آمد. بگرفت سرش از خاک با جذبه فتاری که محو شده زفلاک حقت ز نزار آمد. سن است ورا کامل بنگر تو به نظر طرف، تقویم تو تکلیف تو تقویم است حقت به شعار آمد. ای قائم حول میم گشتی تو کنون چون هیم، ربت ز برار و ری در نام فتار آمد. از جذبه ربانی ها میم شد ابراهیم، در آن شده آن طائف هجرش به کنار آمد. بهجت تو مرا بهجت دریاب کنون دریاب، کان جوهر لیلایی از شطر برار آمد. بنگر که تو را جذاب از منطقه ابرج، برگیر ورا در بر صبرش به قرار آمد. بردار تو برقع را از روی بهاییه، حقت به جلال و فر در بوس و کنار آمد. بالله شود ظاهر اقرب ز طرف العین، آن روز مرا کو اذن از شطر دیار آمد. برخوان خداوندت با رنه طوبایی، از رکن عراقیه نصرت به نثار آمد. So at the end she's talking about the coming of Baha'u'llah. That beloved, spiritual beloved now has appeared, will come very soon, and from Shatra Arawiye, Iraq. Go ahead. Oh, okay. It's in, yeah, it's in here. Bye. And you can, when you think it's, you can describe a little.
Yeah, one of the things that we decided very early in this process of learning how to do this was that our footnotes at the bottom got more and more numerous and more elaborate. So there are a lot of allusions in Tahirih's poetry. In a sense, it's much more difficult than the poetry of Baha'u'llah, because she will say one word and by it she will be alluding to a whole passage and tradition in the Quran that if you don't know the background to it doesn't make any sense. So we have long introductions to the poems and many footnotes and so on. So I will read it through fairly straight through. I will stop if I think there is an allusion that you need. One of the amazing things about Tahirih from a Baha'i point of view is that even though she was executed in 1852, 2 years after the Bab himself was executed, it is very clear as she was writing her poetry that she was not only well aware of the full station of the Bab, even though she never met him, but that she was also fully aware of the station of Baha'u'llah, who did not announce his own station until 11 years after Tahirih was executed. So she has a spiritual station from a Baha'i perspective that we can only guess at. We titled this poem, Be Thou Prepared, O Bijat. And as Amullah said, Bijat is not only a confidant, he is an intermediary between her and her followers. And I say her followers because even though she was a Babi and herself a follower of the Bab, she also had those whom she taught the faith to, as did each of the letters of the living, the first 18 to believe in the Bab. O Bijat, Wahij itself is flourishing because of your Bijat, that magnetic ecstasy exploding into sparks of ecstasy. From the source of all honor and glory, a bounty descended for you. Behold now the panorama, how he arrived with honor and dignity. O Bijat, hearken with an attentive ear, that you may clearly observe how Moses came to this same region. From his sacred cycle, the Bahiyeh stars revolved in the circle of existence by God's command. With but one glimpse of them, the inhabitants of Ma, the Bahiyeh angels became absorbed, then intoxicated. O Bijat, I have read all your signs, and your station is assured in the presence of the Lord of the throne on high. Blessed are you, 100 times blessed, for that which appeared from the constellations. Verily your destiny was discerned from the realm of light. With certitude, behold, how your soul is the great prize for your movement. Unmatched and splendid, aligned itself with his orbit. O beloved one, receive this wondrous bounty from God, your beautiful countenance ever in God's presence. The young trees in the bosom of Eden exploded into sparks from the dome of Tur. Tur is Mount Sinai, and many references are made to it, the story of the Ten Commandments and so on. O Bijat, that tree in Eden was inflamed by you, and the sparks from that tree set the universe aflame. Praised be God that Ahmad, the Habib of God, is the Qaim, that from the nature of his favor your own light has become ignited. Now, the Ahmad she's referring to is the Bab, and he is considered by Baha'is to be the Qaim, he who will arise in the name of the family of Muhammad. He was a Sayyid, and he was a descendant of Muhammad, as was predicted in the traditions. Praised be God that Ahmad, the Habib of God, is the Qaim, that from the nature of his favor your own light has become ignited. By God he is the beloved from the supreme robe, and through the great Sikir, the robe of God assumed a human form. Bijat, O Bijat, behold the divine signs illumined by the light from the mirror of your own heart. O beloved, O my beloved, O Bijat, full of joy, from the unfolding of the Bayan, Adam has come into these regions. From the panorama before you, gaze upon God. The ark has paused that you might board it, that you might arrive at my presence in the twinkling of an eye. The Baha'iyeh mirror orbits in the universe. Your determined must be relentless, O Bijat. If you ask for your Lord, if you ask your Lord for the one who has appeared among men, your destiny surpassed the illumination of the sun, the influence of either stars or moon. You must hasten forth with attraction to the beloved, so that you may become erect and your seed scattered throughout the region. Now here's where she alludes to the coming of Baha'u'llah. Again, from the Baha'i point of view, the day of resurrection, as foretold in the Old Testament, the New Testament, and in the Quran, is fulfilled by both the Bab and Baha'u'llah. In fact, the Bab alludes to the coming of Baha'u'llah as the latter resurrection. And so basically the day of resurrection begins with the Bab and continues forward. We're in that day now, because day in Baha'i terminology means the dispensation, the time period during which a religion has its effect on human advancement. O beloved one, no change is there in this divine tradition. One who would seek God must relinquish allegiance to the moon and sun. Here again, you see this illusion that Amrullah was explaining. You forego the lesser attractions. All right? So let me read that again. O beloved one, No changes there in this divine tradition. One who would seek God must relinquish allegiance to the moon and sun. A star appeared to him in the heavens. It then faded, turned pitch black. Then without peer or likeness, the Fitrier splendor descended beside him from the cloud of Amah. Now, Fitrier means natural or inherent, the nature of Adam. Is inherently divine or infallible or perfect nature. And so it means the natural or inherent splendor. And then Amah is the cloud of bounty, or if you will, the heavenly realm from which descends all of this. So let me read that couplet again. Then without peer or likeness, the Fitrier splendor descended beside him from the cloud of Amah, and lifted his head from the dust by means of Tahirih, attraction, saying, O obliterated one, God descended from the heavens for you to discern. Behold with your own eyes how flawless is his handiwork. Since God has appeared in your own garments, your duty is refinement. And again, God appearing in your own garments is dealing with the fact that the manifestations come in the form of a human being. O Cain, surround men. You have now become like him. Your Lord came from the deserts of Ray in the form of Hatar. Indeed, by the Lord's attraction, Mim became Abraham, so that he instantly circumambulated the Kaaba, which was beside him. O Bijat, thou who art my Bijat, now must you comprehend the meaning of that dark night that came from the deserts. Behold that he is attracting you from the celestial concourse. Embrace him, for his patience has now become established. Remove the veil from the Baha'i face. Your Lord has come with embraces and kisses, with majesty and grandeur. By God, he will appear sooner than the twinkling of an eye. In that day, would you dare suggest that his authority derives from these regions? At your feast with God, aid and assistance will arrive with a paradisical melody from the Iraqi quarter.
So maybe we want to tell a little bit about who Tahirih was for those. You see here, Tahirih is talking about the time that the patience of, like she says, that God's patience is over, now is appearing, that this beloved is appearing. And you can kiss the beloved and have the beloved. And so she's talking about the maturity of humankind and the fact that it's the time for the unity of all people of the earth, as she describes in other points she has. It's the time of harmony, in a time of world peace, and everything that was in God's plan that's going to happen at the time of maturity of humankind, the day of the end. Now it's going to happen. Now, Tahirih appeared in Persia at this time called Iran, and 150 years ago. And she was from a family, as you know, of clergy, very scholarly family. Her mother was a poet, her sister was a poet, her husband, everybody in that family. And from generations, right now you go to a Islamic bookstore, good Islamic bookstore everywhere in the world, Shia bookstores, you should find some book which was written by somebody from Tahirih's family, from Tahirih's background. They wrote so many books, generations after generations. But of course, Tahirih's importance is not her scholarly ability and the fact that nobody dared to debate with her. All the men of the time, the clergy and the scholars, were scared of her when they spoke Arabic in front of her, the Arabs were scared that they're going to make some mistake, and they said it. They're really afraid because she would speak Fusha Arabic, and they might not do it that well. These are Arab scholars. In Iran, the highest scholars of the time were scared of her, and the king of Iran suggested her that get married with the king and save her life. And she wrote a poem and basically said, you know, who are you to get married with me? And so it's not just her scholarly aspect, it's her life, her example of bravery. And of course, one important aspect of it is as a woman. Although in her poems and writings, she doesn't deal with the issue of equality of men and women, but in her life practice and in the words she said before she was martyred, before she was killed, she directly addresses, I mean, by her action and by her words, last words she said, the issue of equality of men and women, and as we know, she inspired many movements of women's rights in Europe and Russia and so forth. Right after she was martyred, a volume of poetry was written, which was a theater in poetry, a play. And Tolstoy loved that and went on the scenes of theaters in Moscow, in Berlin, in Paris, in England, everywhere. It was translated into Germany, in English, and several languages. And many of the prominent women of the time, from the King's Court or scholars or reporters, were really inspired by her to follow her footsteps. So it's very difficult to introduce Tahirih in a few words here, but she was definitely an inspirer of the women's rights by her actions, and she was a scholar, and she was as John said, Qurratiyeh were people who they believed in her. She was their spiritual leader. They followed her everywhere she goes. When she went to one town in west of Iran, all of a sudden there was a town that there were a lot of mystics, dervishes, and all of a sudden they said, okay, you have 2,000 people who follow you as soldiers. Go whatever you want to do. She said, no, I don't want these soldiers. I don't want these things. But wherever she went, any city she entered, before she entered, she sent a message, asked the highest clergy of the time to come and have a debate with her so that she can prove the proof of the truth of this new faith, the Bab. And many of them were scared of her, and they didn't do that, and so forth. Anyway, let's read a little bit more of her poems. I selected some other poems that have different style, completely different. These are the poems that were published in Persian, and you are familiar with them. Let's see which one I select. Sure, you can. Let's read that. That shows her bravery. Let's change our plan here and read that one first. Is the king of Iran, they say, met her several times, and she appeared apparently in front of the king without a cover on face. You know, at the time, women in Iran had cover like women in Afghanistan at this time. But you know all the story that she took her veil off in front of 80 of her followers, 80 men, and that was such a shock to all of them. And one of them even tried to, one of them, if you found it, then I found the number in Persian. And one of them even tried to commit suicide. It was so hard on him that Tahirih is doing something like that. His leader, a spiritual leader, is the this one, rebuking 30. 30. Okay, I'll read it in Persian then. This is, of course, all the Persians are familiar with it. It's very, very beautiful poem. And as you know, Tahirih finally was killed. And جذبات شوقی که الجمت به سلاسل الغم و البلا، همه عاشقان شکسته دل که دهند جان به ره ولا. اگر آن صنم ز ره ستم پی کشتنم بنهد قدم، فقد استقام به سیفه فلقد رضیت بما رضا. سحر آن نگار ستمگرم قدمی نهاد به بسترم، و اذا رأیت جماله طلع الصباح کانما. نه چو زلف غالیه بار او، نه چو چشم فتنه شعار او. شده نافه‌ای به همه ختن، شده کافری به همه خطا. تو که from here he's talking to the king. تو که غافل از می و شاهدی، پی مرد عابد زاهدی چه کنم؟ که کافر و جاهدی ز خلوص نیت اصفیا. به مراد زلف معلقی، پی اسب و زین مغرقی. همه عمر منکر مطلقی، ز فقیر فارغ و بینوا. تو ملک الجاه سکندری، من و رسم و راه قلندری. اگر آن نکوست تو در خوری، وگر این بد است مرا سزا. بگذر ز منزل ما و من، بگزین به ملک فنا وطن. فاذا فعلت بمثل ذا ولقد بلغت بما تشاء. That's number 30.
Yeah, we entitled this Rebuking the King's Desire. At first, she's not talking to the king. The raptures of yearning for you have constrained with the chains of sorrow and calamity all the broken-hearted lovers who gladly give up their lives in the path of your love. And if out of caprice or cruelty my beloved be intent on slaying me, stainless though I be, I will be patient under his sword, and indeed I will content myself with whatever contents him. At dawn that cruel charmer of mine deigned to approach my bed, and when I saw his face, it was as if the morning itself had dawned. No musky scent in all Khotan can match the fragrance of his tresses. No infidel in all Khotan possesses such seditious eyes as those of my beloved. But you, O king, ignorant of wine's ecstasy and love's longing, can but pace behind the pious ones, the ascetics. And what can I do when you doubt or disdain the holy motives of these sanctified ones? You desire only a woman's dangling ringlets, the well-bred steed, the silver-studded saddle. Your entire life you have been ungrateful to the poor, have abhorred the destitute in your midst. For you there exists empires only, Alexander's pomp and glory. For me, the ways and the habit of the Darvish suffice. You adore kingdoms, take them. As for me, this chastisement is bounty enough. So pass beyond this interlude, this notion of I or we. Dwell in your kingdom of nothingness. When you enter therein, you will indeed have attained your heart's desire.
Okay, let's see which other points we read. What's that? The result was that. Yes, I mean, they wanted to execute her Maybe it's the time to read now. Then they, of course, because of her allegiance to the faith of the Bab, and because of many things. I mean, this is a woman who, when her husband, you know, she went to Iraq to study because that was the scholarly place for Shias. And when she came back, her husband sent a message, come home. And she said, basically, she said, if you, something like, you stupid one, if you deserved me, you would have come unfit out of the town, and you would walk in front of my horse, take me to home. Then maybe you would have, and if you were pure enough, you would have been deserving for me to share with you my thoughts and message. But you don't deserve any of this. So this is a woman that, I mean, everybody is upset with her. She's changing the whole tradition upside down, you know. So why did they kill her? Allegiance to the Bab, but her actions also, her life practice, the way she was and what she did. And of course, if she wanted to save herself, she would have listened to the king. So maybe it's a good time now, we're talking about her martyrdom. Before she was killed, she was interviewed by 2 clergy. And then again, after this interview, she writes a poem. Basically, you need to see the poem itself about these 2 people that they were interviewing. She relates it to the concepts, philosophical concepts and so forth, and also she basically criticizes them. And let me read that poem. That's number 23. She uses the word 2 a lot because there were 2 people who interviewed her. And first she talks about one's mystical, philosophical point that the world is, in Sufi terminology, the mark on the corner of the lip, khal, is a symbol for the world of spiritual world, the world of singleness. The world before it was manifested into the multiplicity of things, the thing that has all the beauties of world embedded in it. And then the hair is a symbol of the multiplicity of the world, the confusion of the world, and the attractions of the world, and that. So she starts with that concept. Hal bekunj lab yeki. Now maybe she's talking about herself, that the spiritual beauty is embedded in herself. Hal bekunj lab yeki turre mushk fam do. وای به حال مرغ دل دانه یکی و دام دو. محتسب است و شیخ و من صحبت عشق در میان. از چه کنم مجابشان پخته یکی و خام دو. There's one knowledgeable here, 2 stupid ones. What am I going to say to them? محتسب است و شیخ و من صحبت عشق در میان. از چه کنم مجابشان پخته یکی و خام دو. صورت ماه طلعتان زیر کمند گیسوان کس به جهان ندیده است صبح یکی و شام دو. حامل خم ز دخت رز باده کشان بگرده او. طفل حرام زاده بین باب یکی و مام دو. ساقی ماه روی من از چه نشسته غافلی باده بیار می بده نقد یکی و وام دو. مست دو چشم دلربا و همچو قرابه پرز می. مست دو چشم دلربا و همچو قرابه پرز می. در کف ترک مست بین باده یکی و جام دو. کشته تیغ ابرویت گشته 1000 همچو من. بسته چشم جادویت میم یکی و لام دو. وعده وصل می دهی لیک وفا نمی کنی. من به جهان ندیدم مرد یکی کلام دو. گاه بخوان سگ درت گاه کمین چاکرت فرق نمی کند مرا بنده یکی و نام دو. Number 23.
This examination is similar to that of what happened to the Bab, who was, in his second imprisonment in Sharik, was taken to Tabriz to be examined by a panel of clergy and government officials. And it was at that examination that he proclaimed to them, they said, "Who do you claim to be?" In effect, they were trying to intimidate him so he would say, "Well, I'm nothing, I'm nobody," and so on, and they could let him go, or he would be free, or whatever. And he repeated, I am the promised one. I am the one whose advent you have for 1,000 years invoked, whose name you have for 1,000 years invoked." And he's referring to the Ta'im. And so she's in the same situation, basically. She's being interviewed on the hope that she will cease to proclaim that the Bab is the Ta'im, and that, because you've got to understand, this would be the same as Christ being interviewed in Western Christian tradition by the Sanhedrin. You know, if he said, you know, I deny that I'm the Messiah, and so on, they wouldn't have it executed. But if he is the Messiah, then they've got to follow him. Well, the same thing's true here. If the Bab really is the Qaim, they've lost their jobs. And she was executed. She was strangled, but not in a traditional way. She had a scarf. She put on a wedding dress because she was going to meet her beloved, whom she talked about in the poem we read before. And her beloved, of course, is the Bab and also God. And she had a scarf for this particular purpose because she knew that she was going to be killed. But it wasn't put around her neck. It was stuffed down her throat, which is very appropriate since her main weapon of choice was her own voice and her words. And she was thrown into an abandoned well. But one beauty spot at the corner of the mouth, surrounded by 2 musk-colored tresses. Woe be unto that bird of the heart. There is 1 seed, but 2 snares. I converse with 2, an officer and a sheikh. Between us is a discussion about love. Why should I bother to refute them? But one of us is cooked. The other 2 are raw. The moon-like faces surrounded by the lariat of tresses. Never before has the world witnessed 2 nights with 1 morning. All of these are riddles and paradoxes. 2 nights, but 1 morning. Of course, 2 manifestations, but an endless day, because Baha'u'llah says that this is the day that will not be followed by night. Wine drinkers surround the cask made pregnant by the maiden of the vineyard, beholding this foundling child that has 1 father but 2 mothers. O my moon-faced cupbearer, why do you sit so heedlessly? Bring us wine and give us drink, 1 for now and a second for later. Those 2 heart-rending eyes are drunk like a goblet brimming with wine. Observe in the palm of that drunken Tartar a single vintage, but 2 vessels. Thousands like me were slain by the sword of your eyebrows. Nations are captivated by the spell of your eyes. 1 M and 2 L's. And again, this is all explained in footnotes, and it kind of destroys the poem to have to stop and explain all this. But it's all, most of it is alluding to the coming of the Bab and Baha'u'llah as twin manifestations. And yet there it is one whole integrated revelation. The thousands being alluded to are the thousands of Babis who had already at this point in 1848, beginning in the fall of 48, for the next 2 years, over 20,000 Babis were slain And of course, slain by your eyebrows, in the sense the brow is a sign of beauty, and their love was such that they gave their lives for the love of God. And so that's how this sort of indirection she's talking about, that they're so attracted that they easily give up their lives. You promise union, but you do not keep your word. Never have I observed in this world an honorable man with two opposing words. At one time, call me but a dog at your gate. At another, call me your lowly thrall. It matters not to me. The same servant with two names.
So the result of this interview was that these two clergy signed the death penalty for the death declaration for Tahirih, and she's martyred. Let's see, I've selected a few more poems, and so we have like 15 minutes. Okay, now in the middle of all these struggles that Tahirih was going through, she was one of the very happy people, but she was a very happy person. She is known as being very happy, humorous, and also happy in her life. Very positive, strong person. And so I'm going to read one poem, which is very, very positive of her poems. She is talking about the fact that the time of the fulfillment of the promises and prophecies of the books of God in terms of maturity of humankind has arrived. And as a time that now the lover can get to the beloved. Also, she's talking about, this is very appropriate for reading it in Nowruz. So not that long ago we had Nowruz, the beginning of the year. ای خفته رسید یار برخیز، از خود بنشان غبار برخیز، هین بر سر مهر و لطف آمد ای عاشق زار یار برخیز، آمد بر تو طبیب غمخوار ای خسته دل نزار برخیز. ای آنکه خمار یار داری آمد می غمگسار برخیز، ای آنکه به هجر مبتلایی شد موسم وصل یار برخیز، ای آنکه خزان فسرده‌ات کرد، ای آنکه خزان فسرده کردت اینک آمد بهار برخیز، هان سال نو حیات تازه است ای مرده لاشه پار برخیز. Number 5.
The last word, as you heard repeated, is arise, and that's what we've named the poem, arise. O sleeping one, the friend has arrived, arise. Shake off that earthly dust, arise. Behold the heart-sick lover of the friend, he who was aloof has turned kind and benevolent, arise. O frail and broken-hearted one, the consoling physician has come to your bedside, arise. O thou half drunk with intoxication for the friend, the choice solacing wine is here, arise. O thou who art sick with separation, the season of reunion with the friend has arrived, arise. O thou whom autumn made melancholic, now spring really has come, arise. Behold the new year, teeming with new life. Cast off that dead flesh, become reborn, arise.
Yes, we do one more of Tahirih, yes? One more of Tahirih or not? Do we have time? Just this one? Yes. Yes. One more from Tahirih, and then one from the other book. Now, there is, as John mentioned, there is another volume of Tahirih's poems which is translated, and it's supposed to be published in a year or so. No, you want to do face-to-face? Yes. Okay, we do face-to-face. Is number 27. Face-to-face is in the style of Rumi's poetry. It is known that Tahirih was very much influenced by Rumi, the great mystic that Baha'u'llah calls the divine mystic. And recently, last maybe 5 years or so, Rumi's translation have become the best sellers in the. He just has come to the attention of the West bestsellers, and one of John's close friends have translated Rumi's Coleman Barks, yes. But anyway, when you read in some of these one Rumi poem, or more than one, in Ruberu, Mubemu, Kubeku, these are all Rumi's poems. So they say this is inspired by Rumi's. And there are, of course, this specific poem, some Baha'i scholars say is not from Tahirih, it's from another person. But John and I thought, even if some of these poems, if they are not Tahirih's, the fact that they're attributed to Tahirih, there is reason for it. Tahirih has been reciting this, or has been writing these poems, and this is something I want to describe. This in this Adam's Wish, this volume is written. No, the other book, Adam's Wish. The volume is written before Tahirih's death. The first transcription is a year before Tahirih was martyred, a year before the anniversary of the first year anniversary of the Bab's martyrdom. And in that volume, there are poems that Baha'i scholars say it's not Tahirih's. And so then what was the same poem that you want to read, Gar be to uftadam nazar, this is written, transcribed a year before Tahirih died. And at the end of it, Tahirih says the day of martyrdom is closed, because it's written in the 20th of Shaban, which is 8 days before the anniversary of the martyrdom of the Bab. So she says, یوم شهادت اکبر نزدیک است و بعد از شهادت نقطه دیگر مهلتی لأجل احدی نیست. So, if this volume was written a year before she died, and if in that is گر به تو افتادم نظر, if it's not Tahirih's, it's at least a poem that Tahirih liked. There's some reason that this was, and then Tahirih at the end of it writes a note at the end of this volume, about this volume. So at least we could say that Tahirih liked this poem.
One thing about both Adam's Wish and the book that's coming out next year, Resurrection Day, is that the version is from that manuscript. We've actually used the facsimile from the original manuscript.
Is there any idea who else it might be? If she wrote in such a particular language and loftiness, to anyone else who would be?
Yeah, they say that this specific poem that we are going to read, they say it belongs to a specific person. I guess another lady, Tahirih, or some other poet, I forgot. But there are studies recently that say this poem, like there are two poems, that one of them there are two poems who are published in other poets' volumes. So one of them probably is that poet's, because it's published there and matches with the rest of the poems. I personally think most probably is that poet's, but still doesn't matter. Tell something about Tahirih. Okay, 27. This poem, all the Persians know it. گر به تو افتادم نظر چهره به چهره رو به رو شرح دهم غم تو را نکته به نکته مو به مو از پی دیدن رخت همچو صبا فتادم خانه به خانه در به در کوچه به کوچه، کو به کو. می رود از فراق تو خون دل از دو دیدم، دجله به دجله، یم به یم، چشمه به چشمه، جو به جو. دور دهان تنگ تو عارض عنبرین خطت، غنچه به غنچه، گل به گل، لاله به لاله، بو به بو. ابرو و چشم و خال تو صید نموده مرغ دل، طبع به طبع و دل به دل، مهر به مهر و خو به خو. مهر تو را دل حزین بافته بر قماش جان، رشته به رشته، نخ به نخ، تار به تار، پو به پو. در دل خویش طاهره گشت و ندید جز تو را، صفحه به صفحه، لا به لا، پرده به پرده، تو به تو. 27. 27.
Does that sound like yours? If ever I should behold you face to face, eye to eye, eye to eye, I would be bold to recount my heart's plaint, point by point, verse by verse. Like Saba, the east wind, I have searched everywhere for your countenance, from house to house, door to door, alley to alley, quarter to quarter. Bereft of your visage, my two eyes have wept such bloody tears, tigress after tigress, stream upon stream, spring after spring, brook upon brook. Your bloom-like mouth, your face enveloped with ambergris hair, blossom to blossom, flower to flower, tulip to tulip, fragrance to fragrance. Your perfect brow, your eyes, your beauty spot have preyed on the bird of my heart, sense to sense and heart to heart, feeling to feeling and mood to mood. My desperate heart has knitted your love to the very fabric of my being, string by string, thread by thread, warp by warp, and woof by woof. Tahirih has searched every layer of her heart, but found only you there, sheet by sheet, fold by fold, cover by cover, over and over again. We're going to finish with a poem from our book that was a compilation of poems we put together from those who were martyred or and wrote about their love of the faith, such as Varga and his son Ruhullah, who wrote a rather lengthy poem that we have in here. But we're going to end with a poem by a contemporary poet, a former member of the House of Justice who was nice enough to contribute this to our volume, Hushman Fatih-Azam. So we'll read that in Persian and then in English.
مثال یار. دامن کشان برفت و کسی را نشان نبود، چون باد خوش وزید و به جا یک زمان نبود. با برق یک نگه که به عالم روانه ساخت، زد آتشی چنان که دلی در امان نبود. رفتم به پای شوق که جان در رهش دهم، جانم نثار بود ولی جان ستان نبود. بر گلبن امید چه بیجا گریستم، اشک روان چه سود که سرو روان نبود. گفتم مگر که دامن تو آیدم به دست، گفتا برو برو که تو را آن توان نبود. مور غریق راه ز دریا برون نبرد، مرغ جریح طایر آن آشیان نبود. شرط لیاقت است و طلب قرب دوست را، از بخت شور ماست که این بود و آن نبود. جز ذره غبار که بر دامنش نشست، راهی دگر ز بهر وصالش عیان نبود. پس خاک راه باش تو و بر تو بگذرد، پس خاک راه باش تو و بر تو بگذرد آن یار بینشان که چو در جهان نبود. ای دل بشارتت که حصول وصال یار، دور از کرم نمایی آن مهربان نبود.
This is called Reunion with the Beloved, and it's the title poem from the book, Reunion with the Beloved. Elegantly trailing his robe, he departed, leaving no trace behind, like a pleasant breeze that blows by, then instantly is gone. He sent to the world a lightning glance from his eyes that set ablaze a fire from which no heart was immune. I hastened eagerly to sacrifice my life in his path. My life was offered up, but there was no life-taker there. Uselessly I wept beside the rosebush of hope. What good were flowing tears without the flowing cypress? I pleaded, perhaps I could but seize the hem of your robe. Depart, said the beloved. Depart, for you possess no such craft. Certainly a drowned ant cannot make its way out of the sea, nor can a wounded bird fly to the heights of that sublime nest. Nearness to the friend requires both search and merit. It is my salty luck that I possess but one and lack the other. Unless I be a particle of dust that settles on his robe, there is no way apparent for my reunion with him. Thus, I will become dust in his path, and the beloved will pass by, that traceless friend, so unlike any other in the world. O my heart, glad tidings be unto you. Reunion with the friend is not at all remote from the beneficence of that kind one. Thank you.